Ready?
Yep, go ahead.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Eric Planey,
Hello, I'm Lucas Finko.
and for better or for worse, we are the pirates of clean tech.
Arg.
Arg. I don't think the arg goes over very well on Zoom, but we still do it. We're gonna keep doing it until someone laughs at it. This is our second official episode. Last Tuesday we launched with our first episode, and the feedback was truly amazing. We were so happy to have so many people check out our first episode, and really happy to hear people talking about us and giving us great critiques and suggestions about how to make the show better. So as the next few episodes keep going, we're going to change our format slightly to respond to those. And we want this to be an episode in a TV broadcast for everybody who's listening. We want to feel everyone has a place in it, and we always welcome feedback and comments below.
Yes, and thank you to all our new subscribers. If you want to be updated when new videos get posted, you just click on the subscribe button below. Doesn't cost you anything. You just click subscribe, and then you get a notification when our new videos are up.
And we want to thank those 3 or 4 subscribers that actually are not related to us. So parents, cousins, spouses, thank you guys. That's great. We expected you guys to come in. But those 3 or 4 people who we actually don't know who you are, thank you very much. That means a lot to us.
All right, are you ready, Eric, to get into the week's news?
I am, but before we started recording, you came up with a theme, and I thought I had a theme as well. So what's your theme for today?
My theme is big picture. We found a lot of articles that kind of take a step back and see how we're doing and where we're going to get by 2030 or 2040 or 2050 and how are we doing. And I think it's really, really positive to see what's going on. I know some people try and frame it as negative. I think it's great. So I can't wait to talk about it.
It's a good discussion. And I think the thing that I was thinking about is really we should call today's episode Back to the Future, because you're absolutely right. It did talk about what's going to happen by 2030 and 2035 and 2040. And for me, that's something that's it's incredible. 5 years ago, a lot of people were dismissing clean technology's ability to adapt into our current infrastructure, and that's completely changing now. People really are starting to see the momentum, and that's also bringing the average citizen in terms of their willingness and want to have clean energy implemented holistically across their lifestyle.
Cool. Are we ready?
I'm ready, except I'm spilling my coffee.
Okay, I'm up first, right? So here we go. So we'll start first on Utility Dive here. This is a story I didn't really want to talk about, but I felt like I had to talk about it because it's all the rage and the talk of clean energy. The feds are moving to try and change the net metering rules, which is really odd because these are regulated by the states. And this article in particular from Utility Dive talks about how the utilities aren't really taking a position on this policy. And in my opinion, and I'm sure people are going to disagree with me, I don't think utilities really have an opinion one way or the other. Most of them are regulated by the state or their co-ops. And so they offer rates that people want or regulators want. And so they typically don't have too much of an opinion, I think, except for the whole redistribution of monies, because they tend to be very lucrative for the person installing the solar panels. So it's interesting to see that that FERC is trying to get in here.
I guess when I was looking at this story, a couple things came to mind. One is, are we just too big of a country vis-a-vis Germany to really have a one-size-fits-all policy towards rate paying and towards public utilities and their interaction with local utilities? That was question number one. Question number two, I think 20, 30 years ago, everything was so decentralized to a state-by-state basis. But now you have utility conglomerates, right, that have 3 or 4 regulated entities that they own that are state by state. So they also do have a little bit of an extra overhead and bureaucracy of having to manage those processes on a state by state basis. So I guess the question is, what do utilities actually want right now? I don't know if I know that answer. And what's better for the average rate paying consumer, right? Which is, I think, who you and I are trying to look out for at all times.
Right. And it talks about all these factors too, right? 38 states have some form of net energy metering. Utilities have in the past raised the issue of cost shifting. I don't know if you guys have seen the Arizona television commercials, which were about your neighbor stealing the sprinkles off of your ice cream cone or something like this. um, and it says that they maintain a high compensation rate for the smaller solar facilities. So, yeah, it's just an interesting trend that we're seeing of the feds coming in and trying to influence the state's decisions on clean energy policies.
Yeah. Well, first off, stealing the sprinkles is a bad thing. My father used to steal my Dairy Queen from me as a child. He used to chalk it up as a life lesson. I knew better at the time. I guess this is something I'd like to get to know a little bit more about. Obviously, I actually have mixed emotions towards net metering distributed energy on the rooftop. I'm still not sure it's the most efficient. I'm still not sure that there's harmony between the utilities and the distributed energy developers. And I'd like to see a little bit more harmony between them and understanding how grid interaction works. And I don't know if that's a technology answer or if that's a policy answer. So I'm honestly not educated enough to feel comfortable saying whether or not I truly agree with this story or not. But stories like this pop from time to time, and we got to keep track of them to really see like how forward the federal government's going to go and try to launch oversight, and then how much overreach they really have in terms of what the states control and what the states' rights are.
Yeah, and I have a lot of strong feelings about distributed versus centralized, and we should probably cover that in another week, right? We'll find some interesting information on that.
I think having a guest host who really knows distributed may be the thing we want to do.
That would be a great idea.
All right, there's a little hint for coming down the road.
All right, I'm going to move on to some more big picture stuff.
Sure.
90% clean grid by 2030 is not feasible. Well, that's fine. But it's much, much cheaper now. So I'm reading this as very good news. I've never advocated for 90% clean grid by even 2050. I'm a big advocate of 80% clean grid. So this is not a heartbreaking story for me. This is actually really good news.
No, you missed the word. Go back up. It's saying not just feasible. It's saying it's feasible and it's going to be cheaper too.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So this is good news. So I've always been an advocate of 80% clean energy by 2035 or 2050 or something of this nature. I felt it's always been feasible. So this is really good to see that costs are coming down for renewables and that they're becoming competitive. So this is a very good sign. Along the same lines, they have a similar, these are both from GTM, similar story here about solar, wind, storage, link arms, and a push for majority renewables by 2030. This is fantastic news. So by 2030, more than half of the U.S. power mix may be renewables, which is fantastic news. Again, that cost playing in this.
Sorry to interrupt. Can you go back down to that chart that talked about?
Yeah.
This is fantastic. What I liked about this was also, AWEA, the Wind Energy Association, is really going to change their annual conference to be a clean tech conference, and not just wind. So it's going to incorporate solar and storage and everything that consumers also want to see. And I love a comment that I think was in this article, not the other one, where the gentleman effectively said, look, we're not in here to just promote wind at the cost of solar. We are about climate change and answering that. And therefore, we are going to answer that with the right conversations. Actually, it could have been a gentleman from Vestas, Danish wind turbine manufacturer. So I was really happy to see that. That's absolutely right attitude to take. And I think we're going to get there. I mean, we talked about it during the pilot episode, but when Germany on, I think, one day last year had 100% energy generation from renewables, that told me something. That told me the paradigm is shifting and we need to follow that.
Yeah, agreed. It would be great if we could, maybe do an episode from AWA conference. That would be very cool. So very interesting discussion going on this article too. So I really like this, and I think it keyed into some of your articles also. So
Yes, and by not by design, because we independently choose our articles and send them to you. So it is kind of amazing how there was a lot of conversation in the media this week about the future.
right. So we'll roll over to yours, Eric, if you're ready.
Wow. Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
All right. You can pick.
So this one from Scientific American was also great. Most clean energy tech is not on track to meet climate goals.
Yeah, and I like this one because you could look at this one as a glass half empty or glass half full. First off, Scientific American, phenomenal publication, probably one of the oldest science community-based publications in the United States, and has such a great global impact. So happy to do an article from them by Miranda Wilson, Carlos, and E&E News. This one is saying only 6 of the 46 clean energy sectors have made enough progress to actually hit the Paris Accords 2 degrees centigrade cap by the year 2050. And if I recall, I don't have it in front of me, but I think the 6 that they were referring to was solar, wind, electric vehicles. What were the other ones? Do you remember?
Yeah, they're in here somewhere. That sounds about right. Here they are. 6 technologies are solar voltaics, bioenergy power, EVs, rail lighting, and data centers and transmission networks. Well, that seems like 2 to me, but whatever.
But I think that's it's great, and also I love the fact that they're picking out different categories that indirectly impact 2 degrees centigrade, like data centers, for example, right? Obviously, data centers need to be more energy efficient, and they're finding ways to do so. We've been sorry about that. We've been talking about transmission. Obviously, we talk about electric vehicles. We're going to talk about in another article here in a few minutes. So that's the good news. But that's only 6 of 46 categories. If I recall, there are 24 that are on their way to doing better but need a long way to go. And then there's 12 that are just nowhere near the on-ramp, if you will, to achieving what they need to achieve for 2050 and 2 degrees centigrade. And the reality is as time goes on, as we get closer and closer, it's going to get harder and harder to stay under that category. The one thing I thought was really interesting here is they talked about concentrated solar. This is something that is not being discussed a lot in the media in the US. I think there's only 1 or 2 projects, and I think there's a bit of a white elephant project in Nevada that's made some media because the federal government spent a lot of money on it. But concentrated solar, as you can see from the photo, is creating kind of like a grid base of solar panels that focus their rays energies towards one tower that absorb it. I mean, it's something right out of Star Trek or Star Wars. I remember 10 years ago, I hosted a delegation of Israeli scientists, some of which were some of the foremost minds on solar technology and concentrated solar. And it references the fact that I think Israel is actually moving quite fast and quite ahead on concentrated solars, but we're just nowhere near there yet. The other category that we're also a little bit behind on is carbon capture. Talk about a couple of projects in North America, I think one in Canada. We're just not doing enough carbon capture technology. Now, obviously, they're talking about big carbon capture storage. They're talking about, different industrial types of complexes that can pull carbon out of the air, store it. We're just way behind on it, and we need to be more aggressive on it. The one thing it does not bring up that is something that I'm a fan of, I don't think it's the answer, but is a complementary answer, is the 3 Swiss scientists who came up with the 1 trillion trees idea. I've written about it in the past on my LinkedIn page. I think that's a fantastic idea, and I think as part of the global coronavirus recovery, we should be working on carbon capture the old-fashioned way, which is planting 1 trillion trees over the next 15, 20 years. I'm going a little bit off here on the article, but nonetheless, I think I like this because it's a wake-up call. It's still early enough in the game that we can address it. Going back to Lucas's articles about 2030, we are making great strides, and the best part is they're market price-driven great strides on renewables in the United States. And when the United States is making progress, then we have the moral authority to help tell the rest of the world to do the same.
Yeah, I thought, the article seems to have a negative tone, but I see this as a huge, huge positive. Even 5 years ago, this goal of 2 degrees Celsius just seemed ludicrous. Like, there was no chance we were ever going to get there, in my opinion. And we didn't have the technologies, and we didn't have the deployments, and we didn't have the momentum. And now we do have the momentum in 6 of these categories. I think that's fantastic news. They focus on 2 of these that aren't performing, but what about all these other sectors where we're making all this progress? I think this is fantastic. I would have focused the story on the things we're doing great here, and this is fantastic news. I love this.
What I would like to see is this type of article being a bit of a catalyst for, the United Nations and climate accord agreements for people to get together and start setting hard targets for the rest of the 40, and effectively saying, let's every 2 years, let's put another 5 in the category of we're at the threshold, right? I think that would be something we need to do, and I would be very happy to do that.
Well,
so.
And funders need to back it, and somebody's got to fund it, right?
Someone's got to fund it, right? And I do think I'm a believer in initial government subsidy converting to market dynamics. And so it just may be the case that we're just not there on some of those yet. And, a little bit disappointing, but hopefully we will get there.
All right, sounds good. We'll move on to your Clean Energy Wire story here.
This is the one. Yeah, and this one I really like from cleanenergywire.org. And what I liked about it was, from a big picture standpoint, is, sometimes we just pat ourselves on the back for our accomplishments, and then we fall into this whole realm of groupthink, where we don't take a look at something that's been done. We're just going to accept it as it is, and we forget about simple changes that may create incremental improvements. And here's one that just blew me away because I had never thought about this until I read this article. But the title of the story explains it best. Go back up.
Yep.
Most wind turbines output can be boosted by changing rotational direction in a study. And it talks about a study that I think came out of Germany again from the German Aerospace Center. Obviously, I think we've been quoting a lot of German sources, and mainly because, they have the perfect balance between pushing out, academic research along with implementation. But they're effectively saying that as wind farms are usually built in clusters, if done correctly, and you actually change the rotation from clockwise to counterclockwise, a series of wind turbines at the back of that cluster could be generating as much as 23% more energy out of one turbine. And I found that to be absolutely fascinating. It doesn't surprise me. Back in my much skinnier days, I was a cyclist, and anyone who watched the Tour de France or competitive cycling knows about the power of the peloton. As a group, you can actually create more speed together because you're addressing aerodynamic forces as a group, as opposed to one individual cutting through the wind on themselves. And when I read about this told me exactly the same thing, and that's why it made a lot of sense to me. But the fact that is a simple change in direction on and it said, I think, in the northern hemisphere. And we kind of talked about things that we all know about, which is, the wind sometimes blows at night, which is not optimal for, energy usage. Sometimes, obviously it blows in steadier places like offshore, which is a costlier proposition for a development of a farm. So if you're able to get more efficiency and more electricity driven out of the same physical capital expenditure, then all of a sudden those offshore farms need a little bit less government incentive, government backing, because they're generating more electricity at certain prices, and it's a win-win for everybody. And so I thought this was a great article. Again, it just gets us thinking, which we need to do, because we all in our daily jobs fall into this mindset of working and focusing on our task at hand, and we forget that sometimes taking a step back, looking at what's been accomplished, making changes to that, you're going to have incremental improvement.
Yeah, I think I'm familiar with the Coriolis effect, so I don't really see how that applies here, but I've seen these studies for many years, and I've often wondered, what's the operational advice that comes out of the study? Like, what do we get out of these expensive, flow studies and fluid dynamic studies? And so finally here it is, the 23% increase is just massive. So it's really interesting to see the outcomes of some of these very expensive, very complex studies producing such a great output. So.
And what I like is, firms like General Electric, Siemens, Vestas, they're going to read this study, and they have the R&D capabilities to start turning the turbines the other direction in the laboratory and validating it. And so this is something that could easily be implemented probably within the next 5 years, because I don't think the technology is there. It's all just about, shifting the rotation. So obviously probably in the propeller itself and in the blades, there has to be some changes, but this can be an easy fix. I mean, 23% more electricity for the same CapEx, I'll sign up for that any day of the week.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I don't know if wind turbines are initially designed to rotate either way. It might just be a simple gearbox change.
Yeah, I don't think I would suspect they're not right now. I also suspect that maybe the blades are meant for one certain direction. So I don't think existing, wind farms can have the capability of just flipping the switch and going the other direction. So I think
Yeah.
it's something about new plan development.
Well, I know the blade angles are tunable, so, but I don't know if they're tunable the other way. So yeah, that's interesting.
I find them very peaceful.
I do too. I think they're beautiful. I don't know why people complain about them being eyesores. I think it's a symbol of man's ability to create energy without destroying things.
Yes,
I think they're great.
I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Okay, we ready for the next one?
We are. We're moving fast today.
Yeah, well,
Uh,
this one's from Clean Technica. You want to take it away?
Yeah, again, just as someone who's very passionate about electric vehicles, starting my electric vehicle conversion project as we speak today, uh, pulling the engine off my old Pontiac and going to start working on that. GM CEO thinks US will take decades to switch to EVs. She could be right, and here's why. I'm a fan generally of GM CEO Mary Barra, although they killed my Pontiac brand. We'll get into that later. She was having a conversation with David Rubenstein, who I've interacted with in my day job in leverage finance. David Rubenstein is one of the three founders of the Carlyle Group, and he has a television show where, and I really recommend the show because he really tries to get current leaders in government and business to, thought-provoking ideas. And so Mary Bear was on there, and she obviously started talking about General Motors, who has been incredibly aggressive and a bit underrated in terms of their performance about putting electric vehicles on the market. The Chevy Volt with a V was one of the most underrated cars. It was an incredible technology advancement. I think some people in the green sector, because it still had an engine, just didn't love it. That's too bad. Anyways, she was simply saying that this is not going to be something that's going to convert within the next 3 to 5 years, where all of society is going to mass adopt EVs. And I think she's right, and I think we have to be realistic about that. As Lucas and I have talked about in prior episodes, we have a lot of questions about the electric vehicle charging grid, that infrastructure, the costs associated with it. We're still not at the point where, let's say, a Chevy Bolt has the same, dollar value and efficiency from an upfront purchase price as a Chevy Cruze, which is their small ICE engine car. And so these things need to be addressed. It's going to take a while for this to convert. In the meanwhile, I think in the meantime, I think OEMs are doing a very good job about making great strides in energy efficiency on their conventional gasoline-powered engines. And so, the battery electric revolution will take place, but it's going to be more of an evolution than a revolution. And I think we have to accept that. I think as every year goes on, we get smarter about battery technology and the cost of batteries coming down and the power generated from batteries, giving us cars that have, range of 250, 300, and hopefully the smallest electric vehicle will have a 400-mile range within a couple of years. That's when I think we're going to get to the point of no return. But it's going to take a while. There's 250 million vehicles on the roads in the United States or North America, one of the two. And the average person holds onto the car over 11 years because the quality is good these days, so cars can last a little bit longer. So just for that turnover to take out, that changeover to take out, and consumer confidence towards electric, it's going to take a while. But I think we have to be patient and just keep moving forward.
Yeah, there's a lot of great information in here. I mean, this is just like the article we saw earlier. It seems like bad news, but when you dig into it, it's really not. I mean, this chart is great here too, showing how, even if you start today and even if you have crazy growth in battery electric vehicles, it's still going to take a long, long time to offset all these, billions of cars on the road. So I don't think this is bad news. I think this is good news.
I agree. Anyways, great article by Clean Technia. We appreciate it. Again, we're going to be following electric vehicles because it is a catalyst. And I think as more people get comfortable with electric vehicles, it's going to have this indirect impact where more people are going to get more enthused about clean energy in general, and they're going to be following it. Just going back to big picture, there's so many more Americans now who state that they believe in climate change and they believe that we have the ability to impact it. And they want to see wind turbines and solar farms. And that really excites me because I think 5-10 years ago, people like you and I were kind of out in the woods. You know, we were a minority. Now there's a not so silent majority of Americans who want to see the direction that all of this is taking.
Yeah, I agree. And there's just great, this was a surprise to see here too. Top selling subpack cars in California. The Chevy Bolt is number one. That's a plug-in EV. Actually own one. That's the picture up here. It's a fantastic car. I love it. I think if you're in a household with two cars, one of them should be electric. And that right there is a huge percentage of the cars on the road. So
I agree 100%. And that's my wife and I are adopting the same strategy. So I am working on a conversion project. I suspect my car, when it converted, is not going to get more than 50 miles per charge. I'm doing this for personal second reasons. But 50 miles on a weekend is perfectly fine for you to go to the gym, the grocery store, hardware store. That's
right.
exactly what you need. And I'll feel very confident driving that little 50-mile 1980s retro cool poncho.
Yeah, sounds very cool. I can't wait to ride in it.
Yes, it's and you can go on my YouTube channel, shameless plug, Project Badass 80s EV Conversion. Take a look. We'll put that on our Twitter feed.
Yeah, speaking of our Twitter feed, ta-da! Here's our new Twitter feed, Pirates of Clean Tech. It's twitter.com/clean pirates. So we'll post all the latest info on our channel here. We'll be posting our links. Special thank you for the photograph to Sada.
Yes, I hope you pronounced her name the right way.
I hope so too.
You got the Cornelius effect pronounced correctly, which I just did not pronounce it correctly.
Coriolis.
Coriolis. I kept saying Corolla, Toyota Corolla effect.
It's all the same.
Anyways, follow us on Twitter. We're going to be posting the articles that we bring up every day, so with links to those publications and the authors. And please get more engaged. And if you have any questions, you can do your comments below in the YouTube page, and you can also join in as a subscriber. We'd love to have you, and we'd love to get your feedback any way possible.
Yeah, I would second that. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What more do you want to hear about? If you like the episode, you can click on like also down here. That'll help us out. And we look forward to seeing you next week and every week.
Yep. And last, I got to do my little disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed by Lucas and myself are those of ourselves and not any organization or company we may be affiliated with.
All right. So have a good week. We'll see you next week.
Sounds good. Take care, everybody.
Adios.
Arr.
Arr.
Pirates don't say adios.
Spanish ones do.
That's like 6 centuries ago.
I'm a Spanish pirate.
Arr.